After cleaning up the last of the blood, the priest splashes water on his face, hoping the chill will help steady him, steel his nerves ahead of the ceremony. He's performed dozens, hundreds even, knows the order of service for a Catholic wedding by heart. That was until it had found him. The Faith Eater, he calls it. When it first appears, or rather, its voice does, the priest falls for its trick. He thinks it's the voice of God speaking, reaching down from the heavens to offer up divine wisdom. But the more strange things the voice tells the priest to do, the more he begins to wonder. Then it starts telling him about the weddings, what to do, who to accept, how many it needs, and where to expect the Harbinger. It looks almost satanic the first time, the sights and sounds of what could only be an unholy ritual. But wrestling with it afterwards, the priest believes the lies told by the Faith Eater, that this is all part of the grand plan. The Harbinger is only present at these services to help determine who is worthy and who isn't. For a time, the priest resigns himself to his own lack of understanding. The Lord's ways are not his to know, his methods beyond the comprehension of a mortal. But he still has nightmares about all the blood. Lifting his head and looking at himself in the mirror, the priest clenches a fist, trying to stop the trembling of his fingers. The voice of the Faith Eater is still in his head, telling him that its Harbinger has arrived. A door opens behind him, and the priest sees the figure in the mirror behind him. They always look the same, always appearing as a man of middle age. But beneath the surface, it has no organs, its body made of the same fibrous tissue as an insect, hair and teeth formed from chitin. This is more cicada than man, just like the Faith Eater itself. It's always nerve-wracking, performing the ceremony knowing there's one present who doesn't belong. The priest always expects there to be a perceptive child or someone, anyone, on the bride or groom's side to point out there's a stranger standing among the groomsmen, that the Harbinger will be noticed and the subterfuge will be gone. But it never happens. They're always happy to see Cousin Johnny, as they call it, and laugh at its jokes. They seem to be able to understand the jumble of words that the priest can hear it speaking in. The priest feels his heart racing as he gets through the order of proceedings, drumming at his ribs, knowing the time to exchange vows is getting closer and closer. The happy couple recite their beautiful words and give each other their rings, and a swell hits the pit of the priest's stomach. The Harbinger, Cousin Johnny, as they know him, steps forward with multiple pairs of pliers in his hands, just like the previous time. He passes them around the other groomsmen he'd been hiding amongst, and the bridesmaids, compelling them to start wrenching their teeth out one by one. There are no screams, no signs of pain, just copious amounts of blood pouring from the wounds in their mouth. As the Harbinger gathers up the removed bloody teeth and presents them to the bride and groom, the newlyweds start eating. The crack of their own enamel, jawbones breaking, is sickening, every time causing the priest to avert his eyes and look upwards. Sometimes he prays to the real God, not the Faith Eater, that this nightmare will cease. Other times, he just stares at the church's rafters. This time, he spots something secluded among the old woodwork overhead, the only other witness to the objectionable ceremony below, a nest of cicadas. Of all the areas of public life that the SCP Foundation keeps under surveillance, one might not expect the world of dentistry to be the one that warrants so much observation. Yet, over the years, if the Foundation's mission has come to prove anything, it's that anomalies can and will occur almost anywhere, in the most likely or unlikely of places, including inside human teeth. Some Foundation agents have spent tireless years, even entire careers, embedded as assistants, receptionists, and other members of staff at dental practitioners, on the lookout for SCP incursions. While under deep cover at these establishments, agents are tasked with keeping a close eye on the medical and dental records of patients, and are instructed to report any potentially anomalous conditions to the Foundation. One recent incident took place at a rural dentist's office in New Mexico. The patient, an unassuming average male, had booked an appointment with a local dental surgery, complaining of a mild pain within his jaw, in and around his canines. The dentist, a man named locally as Uncle Ted, given his reputation as a friendly family dentist, performed a routine examination on the patient, expecting that the man had little more than a minor toothache. On first glance, Uncle Ted thought he was looking at an ectopic growth, wherein a tooth grows in an abnormal position, usually stemming from the root. Shifting his tiny mirror around, he wasn't certain. It could have been a gemination, where a developing tooth splits into two teeth. But the patient had said this pain had only started up relatively recently. On top of that, his teeth were all fully developed. Either one of these conditions would have been noticed much sooner. What he saw when he looked in the patient's mouth was something entirely different. In his uncertainty, the dentist probed at the afflicted tooth with one of his implements and, to his horror, saw something was burrowing inside the tooth. Unbeknownst to him, both the patient and his assisting dental nurse had been undercover operatives of the SCP Foundation and had been waiting for exactly this moment. Now able to get visual confirmation of the anomaly, the assistant locked the dentist and patient inside the office and called in the incident. Within a matter of moments, operatives of the Foundation's Mobile Task Force Lambda-12, also known by the codename Pest Control, had arrived on the scene to detain the patient and bringing Uncle Ted the dentist into custody as a witness to be dosed with amnestics. What he had just witnessed was a cicada crawling into the man's tooth. The SCP Foundation has given this designation to a phenomenon that affects members of the Superfamily Cicadoidea, or more colloquially known as cicadas. What do insects like these have to do with teeth? Well, instances of SCP-5852 are cicadas afflicted with an anomalous growth of human teeth. The development of SCP-5852 has, at present, never been recorded occurring with the teeth of any other species, only human. In addition, researchers at the SCP Foundation have extensively examined each known case of cicadas being afflicted with SCP-5852 growths. As far as anyone is aware, there is nothing linking any of these cases of SCP-5852 infestations. Each recorded specimen afflicted with them have nothing in common, from genetic background to the region the insects inhabit. All SCP Foundation researchers looking into the phenomenon of SCP-5852 seem to concur that these teeth can manifest at random inside any cicadas on the planet. As a result, physical containment of potential specimens is impossible, given the sheer numbers of cicada populations in the wild, all of them considered to be potential specimens. Those known to be afflicted with SCP-5852 instances are referred to under the designation of SCP-5852-1. A cicada becomes one of these when a growth begins, typically occurring when the insect makes direct external contact with an SCP-5852 instance or another infected SCP-5852-1. However, in some cases, researchers have observed a selection of instances wherein infectees suffer an internal onset growth of SCP-5852, seemingly having had no other contact with the anomalous insects. Essentially, they can grow on or in any affected specimen. Once a cicada has been infected, the SCP-5852 growth will begin by manifesting within its body. This can cause anything from mild pain to intense discomfort to the cicada, which only worsens as the growth gets larger. When this occurs, anomalous teeth sprout from it, and these can pierce through an SCP-5852-1 infectee's soft tissues surrounding the developing tooth. As the teeth increase in number, continuing to grow and damage these tissues, it can lead to fatal injuries within the affected cicada, especially if the teeth emerge within and cause damage to the insect's nervous system or cardiovascular system. During experimentation, Foundation research teams have discovered that intervening while these SCP-5852 growths are occurring has proved impossible. One test involved making numerous attempts to counteract the rapid growth of more teeth using targeted injections of acid. Researchers theorized that because human enamel is mostly comprised of a crystallized mineral called hydroxyapatite, that a sufficient application of acid would trigger demineralization, essentially dissolving the teeth growing on SCP-5852-1 instances like salt crystals in water. However, given that acid with a pH lower than 5.5 was required in order to demineralize enamel, this also meant that the infected cicadas were dissolved. Further experimentation with lower measures of acid also resulted in failure. Inevitably, a cicada that has become an instance of SCP-5852-1 will continue to anomalously grow teeth out of its body until they break through the insect's exoskeleton. Once this has happened, it will become entirely overwhelmed by teeth, but will attempt a desperate effort for survival. As is well known among those who live in areas where cicadas emerge en masse after their long period spent dormant, These insects are infamous for shedding their exoskeletons in a process similar to moulting, in a process commonly referred to as sloughing. SCP-5852 infected cicadas will attempt the same when overwhelmed by teeth growths. Foundation entomology experts have since gathered up some of these sloughed exoskeletons and have run numerous tests on them. Conducting close analysis, the Foundation has determined that these exoskeletons are comprised entirely of hydroxyapatite. That's the aforementioned naturally occurring calcium mineral found in tooth enamel. When an instance of SCP-5852-1 sheds its calcified exoskeleton, this signals the termination of the insect's life. In every documented case, the process always results in the death of an infected cicada specimen. This occurs when the teeth that have grown on their old exoskeletons pierce and rupture the softer, underdeveloped exoskeleton the cicada grows to try and replace it. These are far more fragile, and damaging it is enough to kill an SCP-5852 infected cicada, if it hasn't already been killed by having its body ruptured by the teeth growths. Foundation research teams have closely examined the conditions of the teeth that grow as the result of an SCP-5852 infection, and have concluded that over 30% are discolored. Just under 30% possess some form of cavity, and there have, at a lower rate, been instances where an SCP-5852 has manifested as malformed teeth. Some of these have been observed as containing teratomas, a rare form of germ cell that can create tumors in fully formed tissues, including within teeth. Smaller percentages of the teeth that develop in SCP-5852-1 instances are either macrodontia or microdontia, teeth that are either larger or smaller than the average size. Meanwhile, as few others have grown as germinated teeth, wherein one of the developing growths splits into two teeth, or ectopic growths that causes them to form in abnormal positions or grow at an angle. Although some Foundation researchers have pointed out that a tooth growing out of a cicada could easily be considered an abnormal place for teeth to develop. Arguably strangest of all, however, is the 1.45% of SCP-5852 teeth that grow out of infected cicadas in the exact same condition as teeth that have undergone some form of dental restoration or cosmetic repair work. How is this able to occur without the aid of a trained dental professional is still unclear, and a question that has baffled Foundation researchers. The widespread nature of SCP-5852 has made it hard, if not entirely impossible, for the Foundation to contain it. The Foundation themselves have not been exempt from directly experiencing outbreaks of SCP-5852. An incident arose on the 21st of July 2012, significant for marking the first recorded instance of SCP-5852, which normally only affects cicadas, affecting humans. On the day in question, senior Foundation researcher at Site-21 and leader of the team handling the experimentation with SCP-5852-1 specimens, Dr. Charles Greaves, would request a medical examination with an on-site physician. He complained that he'd been suffering with a mild toothache that seemed to be affecting his canines, and the severity of it had gotten so bad that it was affecting his ability to focus and function during work at the Foundation. Shortly after, his request for an examination was approved, and he was submitted to the Site-21 medical office for treatment. The Foundation doctor, in an effort to remove Dr. Greaves' toothache, saw fit to entirely remove the affected teeth. This took little more than conducting a routine extraction and pulling the researcher's canines out, but afterwards, to the horror of both Greaves and the man now looking at his removed tooth, there was something living inside it. Several juvenile, developing instances of Magicicada cassinii, referred to colloquially and among entomologists as the 17-year cicada or dwarf periodical cicada, had somehow burrowed their way into Dr. Greaves' teeth. The entirety of Site-21 was placed on an immediate lockdown as the Foundation struggled to ascertain exactly how these cicadas had gotten into someone's teeth. In order to gauge just how widespread the anomalous incident was, every member of staff was requested to submit to a mandatory tooth examination. Over the course of several hours, it was subsequently discovered that every member of Site-21 personnel who had been assigned to researching SCP-5852 had numerous specimens of cicadas burrowing in their teeth. Checking personnel work logs, there appeared to be a breach and one that risked further potential spread of this infection. A Foundation security guard had been given several days of unpaid leave due to similar symptoms to Dr. Greaves, having reported his toothache a few days prior to the senior researcher. Unlike Greaves, however, the guard was not granted an on-site examination and was forced to instead consult a local dentist and wasn't permitted to return to work until his toothache was resolved. Said civilian dentist, one Theodore Uncle Ted Robinson, would subsequently witness a cicada burrowing into the guard's tooth during the procedure. Fortunately, another Foundation operative was also present during the guard's checkup, and this agent, posing as a dental assistant, was able to contact the Foundation for support. Presently, the offending security guard has been made redundant and received severance without pay. Meanwhile, in his absence, Mr. Robinson's small practice was forced to shutter its doors permanently. Amnestic treatment was administered to the now former dentist. However, an adverse reaction led to exacerbated memory loss prior to Mr. Robinson's release from Foundation custody. The Foundation considers its efforts to contain the SCP-5852-related outbreak a marked success thanks to minimal civilian witnesses and no casualties. The live cicada specimens that were extracted from affected personnel were kept and studied closely. Each one would begin to develop SCP-5852 tooth growth soon after. When analyzing these instances of SCP-5852-1, research teams discovered that the teeth being grown by these cicadas were exact, identical matches to their own teeth. The teeth of the previous hosts were now growing out of the infected insects, though how exactly this occurred, or even how the cicadas were able to burrow into staff members' teeth at all, remains unclear. Following this incident, personnel were instructed to never directly handle instances of SCP-5852-1 and make no skin-to-skin contact with any of the cicadas, regardless of whether they were alive or dead. It remains a mystery to SCP Foundation researchers exactly what is responsible for causing SCP-5852 outbreaks among cicada populations. Nothing has been gleaned about the precise origin of the phenomenon, despite extensive experimentation and examination of infected SCP-5852-1 instances. Given that the tooth-growing phenomena can occur at random among cicada populations, and the fact that this makes containing SCP-5852 somewhat troublesome, the Foundation has been forced to come up with alternate procedures in order to keep public awareness of SCP-5852 as minimal as possible. A cover story was devised and disseminated to civilians through the use of local and nationwide media. Stories began cropping up, especially in areas known for having sizable populations of cicadas, of a condition affecting the insects. This was referred to as tumorous growth disease, providing a plausible explanation for the toothy growths affecting the cicada populations. Later, this cover story was further pushed by Foundation-aligned entomological experts, further promoting the notion that cicadas afflicted with tumorous growth disease could spread a form of mange, a skin disease normally caused by mites and seen in dogs, but that can also result in rashes and irritation in humans, as well as the risk of secondary infections. The result of these cover stories to explain the presence of tooth-riddled cicadas to the public has, for the most part, had the intended effect of prompting civilians to avoid cicadas when they are no longer dormant. This has also led to most civilians avoiding making any contact with the corpses or discarded exoskeletons of the insects out of concerns around the fictitious cicada mange. No further incidents of cicadas burrowing into teeth, like the one that occurred at Site-21, have been noted, given their propensity for tracking, containing, and, when necessary, exterminating anomalous organisms such as insects and vermin. Mobile Task Force Lambda-12 have been assigned as the first response team when dealing with SCP-5852 outbreaks. Should any infected cicadas be reported or found in the wild, then Pest Control are sent to secure them and return them to the Entomology Department of Site-21. So far, very few at the Foundation have questioned why SCP-5852 specifically affects insects of the Superfamily Cicadoidea, and no other entomological group, or why certain other anomalies also seem to revolve around cicadas. One member of personnel, Research Assistant Wolfie Dalebro, did, however, raise this question in a small online forum connected with the Gamers Against Weed, an online collective known to create anomalies for their own amusement. In his post, Wolfie highlighted that there seemed to be some tangential link between SCP-5852 and SCP-2852, a figure known colloquially as Cousin Johnny. SCP-2852 has been known to appear at various Catholic and Anglican religious functions, more specifically at baptisms, weddings, and funerals. An appearance of SCP-2852 often results in ceremonies taking a disturbing and violent turn, which also all seem to be connected to cicadas in some way. Weddings affected by SCP-2852 are referred to by the Foundation as white-level events, and Wolfie Dalebro had discovered that one of these took place in the same location that SCP-5852 was first discovered. Templeton Memorial Church, located in Templeton, West Virginia, had been the site of a white level event several years prior to the discovery being made. A nest of cicadas infected with the anomalous growths, the first recorded instances of SCP-5852-1, were found nesting in the roof of Templeton Memorial Church by Foundation agents clearing up evidence of the disastrous wedding that had been visited by Cousin Johnny. It is unclear if this insect nest was present during the White Level event, and if SCP-5852 was somehow the result of SCP-2852's presence. Since postulating about a connection between SCP-5852 and SCP-2852, Research Assistant Wolfie Dalebro has since been removed from his position at the Foundation. In 2021, he was discovered to have been engaging with the forum connected with the Gamers Against Weed group, and was administered with amnestics following his subsequent termination. It is still unclear if this research assistant was able to learn the connection between SCP-5852 and Imago. Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-478, Tooth Fairies.